The evening started like any other at the grand restaurant perched at the heart of the city's wealthy district. The chandeliers sparkled with a warm golden light, reflecting off polished marble floors and the fine crystal glasses on the tables. Waiters moved quickly between tables, balancing trays stacked with delicate hors d'oeuvres and glasses of champagne. The air was a mix of anticipation, perfume, and the subtle scent of freshly polished wood. Among them moved a young waitress, her uniform crisp but simple, blending into the background of this glittering world. She was used to being unnoticed in places like this, accustomed to the subtle glances that passed over her without acknowledgement. But tonight was different. Tonight, there was an unusual energy, a sense that something extraordinary might happen. She carried herself with quiet confidence, though her heart raced beneath her calm exterior. She had worked here for several months, learning the flow of the restaurant, memorizing the preferences of the regular patrons, and perfecting the art of serving with a smile that did not betray exhaustion. Yet behind that practiced smile, there was another life, a passion she kept tucked away. She loved the piano, not just a casual fondness, but a deep, consuming love. Music had always been her refuge, the one place where she felt fully alive. She had spent countless hours after long shifts practicing on an old, slightly out-of-tune piano in her small apartment, pouring her emotions into melodies that only she knew existed. Tonight, however, her life as a waitress and her hidden musical talent were about to collide in a way she had never imagined. The restaurant was hosting a charity gala, attended by the city's elite, the rich and powerful who moved in a world of influence, luxury, and unspoken competition. They were seated at long tables adorned with white linens and silverware that gleamed under the chandeliers. A string quartet had been scheduled to play, but an unexpected emergency left the piano part of the entertainment missing. The organizer, a woman with a reputation for perfection, was in a state of panic. She had prided herself on flawless events, and now, with the clock ticking and the first guests arriving, she was scrambling for a solution. The waitress noticed the empty grand piano as she passed by the stage area while serving hors d'oeuvres. It gleamed under the spotlights, polished to perfection, yet unplayed. A flutter of excitement and fear ran through her. She paused for a moment, taking a deep breath. She had never played in front of such an audience before, and the idea was terrifying. Yet, something inside her whispered that this might be her chance, the moment where her two worlds could meet. The music she had kept private for so long could now speak to others, could touch hearts beyond her small apartment. She glanced at the organizer, who was speaking urgently with a member of the staff, her hands wringing in frustration. Summoning courage, the waitress approached quietly. She hesitated, unsure if she should speak. Her voice trembled slightly as she said, "Excuse me, I can play the piano if you want. I know the pieces for the evening." The organizer turned, her eyes narrowing slightly, sizing up this young woman. There was a moment of silence, an unspoken judgment passing between them. The staff around them shifted nervously, aware of the tension. The guests were beginning to arrive, and time was slipping away. The organizer opened her mouth to speak but found herself without options. Reluctantly, she nodded. "Very well," she said. "Please, do your best." The waitress's heart leaped. She nodded, grateful and nervous all at once. She moved toward the grand piano, each step echoing slightly against the marble floor. Her hands shook as she lifted the lid, revealing the keys that had always been her friends in private moments, now waiting to become instruments of a performance for strangers. She seated herself on the bench, adjusting her posture, taking a deep breath to steady herself. The restaurant seemed to quiet as if sensing the importance of the moment, the chatter of arriving guests fading into the background. Her fingers hovered over the keys, light and tentative at first. She closed her eyes for a brief moment, letting the music within her take shape. Then she began to play, softly at first, allowing the notes to fill the room gently, cautiously. The sound was pure and delicate, carrying a warmth that seemed to settle over the guests. Those who were talking paused mid-conversation, glancing toward the piano, curious. Some raised their glasses, wondering who this unexpected performer might be. The waitress felt a surge of energy as she played, a sense of connection she had never experienced before. Each note seemed to carry a piece of her soul, expressing feelings she had hidden for so long. As she continued, her confidence grew. The melody became richer, more expressive, flowing effortlessly from her fingertips. The room transformed. What had been a place of polite social interaction and subtle competition became a space where emotions were felt openly. Some guests leaned forward, their eyes widening, captivated by the unexpected brilliance of her playing. The music seemed to transcend the barriers of social class and expectation, touching everyone in the room, whether they realized it or not. The waitress could feel the energy of the audience, a mixture of surprise, admiration, and awe, fueling her performance. Backstage, the organizer watched in disbelief. She had expected polite applause at best, perhaps some murmured appreciation, but this was beyond anything she had imagined. The young woman who had seemed so ordinary moments before was creating a moment of extraordinary beauty, commanding the attention of the entire gala with nothing but her skill, passion, and heart. The staff exchanged glances, equally stunned, realizing they were witnessing something rare and remarkable. The music swelled, reaching a crescendo that seemed to suspend time itself. The guests, who had entered the evening with expectations of networking, showing off wealth, and enjoying the formality of the gala, found themselves silent, absorbed entirely by the performance. Eyes glistened with unshed tears, and some guests even found themselves holding their breath, as if any sudden movement could shatter the delicate spell being woven by her music. The waitress played on, lost in the melody, in the rhythm of her emotions, and in the connection forming between herself and the audience. It was a moment of pure authenticity, unmediated by wealth, status, or pretense. When the final note lingered in the air and slowly faded, there was a pause, a collective intake of breath as the room processed what had just happened. Then, almost simultaneously, applause erupted. It started quietly, but quickly grew, filling the grand hall with appreciation, admiration, and genuine amazement. Guests rose to their feet, clapping and cheering, some with wide smiles, others with tears glistening in their eyes. The waitress remained seated for a moment, taking it in, a mix of disbelief and joy washing over her. She had done it. She had shared her passion, her gift, with the world outside her apartment, and the world had responded in a way she had never dared to imagine. The evening continued, but the energy had shifted. The rich crowd who had arrived expecting luxury and display found themselves humbled by the raw talent and courage of someone they had overlooked. The waitress continued her work, serving drinks and food, but now with a quiet confidence that had not been there before. She had stepped forward, risked exposure, and created a moment of pure, unfiltered beauty. And in that, she realized that her life, her path, could change in ways she had never anticipated, all because she had dared to play her music when the moment demanded it. The night had settled into a rhythm that seemed almost magical, with the soft hum of conversation mingling with the distant clinking of glasses and silverware. The young waitress moved through the crowd with her usual grace, carrying trays and attending to the guests. Yet there was a difference now, something that set her apart from the other staff. The moment at the piano had changed her in a way that was impossible to ignore. Each step she took was lighter, her movements infused with a quiet pride, a sense of self that had been hidden beneath the weight of routine work for so long. Back in the kitchen, she could hear the murmurs of the staff discussing the performance in hushed, amazed tones. Some were skeptical at first, assuming the applause might have been polite or exaggerated, but those who had witnessed her playing knew it had been extraordinary. Her colleagues looked at her with new eyes, their respect evident in the way they spoke and glanced in her direction. It was a subtle shift, but one that filled her with warmth. For the first time, she felt truly seen, not just as a waitress fulfilling her duties, but as someone with a gift that could move others. Despite the excitement, she could not ignore the nerves that lingered within her. She knew that the night was far from over. There would be more music to play, more guests to impress, and the fear of not living up to the brief moment of brilliance she had just shared lingered at the edges of her mind. She tried to push it aside, focusing on the task at hand. Her love for music had always been a source of solace, but now it carried a new weight, a responsibility to herself and to the audience who had been so deeply affected. The organizer approached her once more, a mixture of relief and curiosity in her eyes. "That was remarkable," she said, her voice softer than before. "I didn't expect anyone to capture the room like that. I wonder if you could play another piece? Something more lively to keep the guests engaged." The waitress hesitated for a brief moment, glancing at the polished piano gleaming under the soft lights. The idea of performing again, for a crowd of strangers who had only moments ago seen her as a mere server, was daunting. Yet there was a spark of excitement in her chest, a challenge that she could not ignore. She nodded, a small smile forming on her lips. "I can do that," she replied. She returned to the piano, this time with a sense of purpose, a calm determination that contrasted with the nervous energy of her first performance. She adjusted the bench, took a deep breath, and let her fingers hover above the keys. The guests were settling into the main dining area, unaware of the next moment that would unfold. Yet there was a quiet anticipation in the air, as if the room itself sensed the magic that was about to occur. The first notes of her second piece filled the room with a different energy. This melody was lighter, more playful, with a rhythm that encouraged the guests to relax and enjoy themselves. She allowed herself to smile as she played, feeling the music flow naturally from her hands. Her nerves had transformed into focus, and each note carried both her skill and her personality. She could see the reactions around the room, people leaning forward in their seats, tapping fingers on the table, some even quietly humming along to the melody. As she continued, she began to notice the subtle interactions between the guests. A wealthy businessman, usually rigid and formal, had a soft smile on his face as he listened. A woman, dressed in an elegant gown, glanced at her companion and nodded in appreciation. The music was breaking through barriers, creating a shared experience that no wealth or social standing could diminish. It was a reminder of the power of art, of its ability to unite and move people in ways that words often could not. The waitress felt a surge of confidence as she played. She had always practiced alone, hidden in the quiet of her small apartment, never expecting an audience larger than a few friends or family members. But now, she was performing for a room full of strangers, people who would not know her name or her story, and yet they were responding to the emotion she poured into the music. It was a liberating feeling, one that made every long hour of practice, every moment of doubt and exhaustion, worthwhile. Between pieces, she would glance up at the crowd, catching glimpses of their reactions. Some were leaning back, eyes closed, letting the music wash over them. Others whispered quietly to one another, their expressions a mix of surprise and admiration. The organizer, standing at the edge of the room, watched with a mixture of awe and relief. She had worried that the absence of the scheduled pianist would ruin the event, but instead, this young waitress had transformed it into something memorable, something extraordinary. As the night progressed, the waitress moved seamlessly between serving duties and brief moments at the piano. Each time she played, the room responded with warmth and engagement, reinforcing her growing sense of confidence. She began to see herself not just as someone who could serve or perform, but as someone capable of creating experiences, of touching lives in meaningful ways. The audience's reactions became a reflection of her own growth, a mirror of the journey she had taken from quiet practice to public performance. There were moments of doubt, of course. She worried that she might make a mistake, that her hands might falter under the weight of expectation. But each time, she reminded herself of the joy that music had always brought her, of the countless hours spent pouring emotion into melodies that had never been heard outside her own walls. That joy, that authenticity, became the anchor that steadied her fingers and focused her mind. By the end of the evening, the atmosphere in the restaurant had shifted completely. What had started as a typical high society gathering had become a space where genuine emotion and artistry were celebrated. The guests, once focused solely on appearances and conversation, were now engaged in a shared experience, united by the music that had filled the room. The young waitress moved among them, serving with a quiet pride, aware that her presence was no longer invisible. She had stepped into a new role, one that combined her talent with her work, creating moments of beauty that would be remembered long after the evening ended. When the final notes of the last piece lingered in the air, a hush fell over the room. The guests, fully aware of what they had just witnessed, rose to their feet, applauding with genuine admiration. Some whispered words of praise directly to her, while others simply smiled, acknowledging the rare gift they had been privileged to witness. The young waitress stood by the piano, taking in the scene, her heart swelling with a mixture of relief, pride, and joy. She had faced her fears, embraced her passion, and shared it with the world. And in that sharing, she had discovered a new sense of self, a recognition of her own worth and potential that could never be taken away. As the guests began to leave, the organizer approached her once more. "You've done more than I could have imagined tonight," she said sincerely. "You've made this event unforgettable. Thank you for stepping forward." The waitress nodded, her smile humble but bright. She knew that her journey was only beginning, that this night was the first of many opportunities to share her gift. Yet in that moment, she allowed herself to simply enjoy the feeling of accomplishment, of having transformed a routine evening into something truly remarkable. And as she walked away from the piano for the final time that night, she carried with her the knowledge that courage, passion, and authenticity could change everything, even in the most unexpected places. The grand hall was alive with a quiet excitement as the young waitress prepared for the next part of the evening. She had already experienced the thrill of playing for the crowd once and had gained a newfound confidence. Yet, she knew that each note she struck carried weight. The guests, many of whom were accustomed to luxury and exclusivity, were now attentive in a way that she had never expected. This made her feel both nervous and invigorated. She approached the piano, brushing her fingers lightly over the polished keys, and let out a deep breath to steady herself. This time, she chose a piece that was complex and emotional, one she had practiced countless times in her apartment, but never shared with anyone beyond close family. She wanted to show not only skill but also the depth of feeling that music could convey. Her hands moved gracefully, striking chords that resonated through the hall with a rich, vibrant sound. The notes began softly, drawing the audience in, creating an atmosphere of intimacy despite the grandeur of the room. Guests began to quiet down as they listened, captivated by the unexpected performance. The initial murmurs faded, replaced by a collective focus on the young woman at the piano. The waitress played with subtle variations in tempo and dynamics, allowing the music to breathe and shift naturally. Each passage told a story, conveying emotions she had never been able to express with words. It was a moment where vulnerability met strength, and the audience responded with a deep, unspoken understanding. From the balcony above, a few staff members watched in awe. They had seen her diligence and dedication in the kitchen and on the floor, but they had never imagined the level of artistry she possessed. Whispers passed among them, some in disbelief, others in admiration. They felt privileged to witness the transformation of someone they had known only in a work context into an artist capable of commanding attention and evoking emotion in an entire room. The guests, too, were visibly affected. Some closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them. A few leaned forward, entranced, while others sat back, a soft smile spreading across their faces. The richness of the performance transcended the barriers of wealth and social status. In that moment, everyone was equal, united by the beauty of the music. The waitress, sensing this connection, allowed herself to immerse fully in the experience. Her nervousness dissipated, replaced by a sense of purpose and fulfillment. The organizer, who had initially been skeptical of allowing a waitress to perform, now watched with a mix of astonishment and admiration. She realized that her event had been elevated by a talent she had almost overlooked. The performance was no longer simply entertainment. It had become an emotional journey for the audience. She noticed the subtle gestures of approval, the occasional tear, the wide-eyed appreciation. It was rare to see such genuine reactions from a crowd so used to luxury and spectacle. As the piece progressed, The waitress experimented with subtle improvisations, adding delicate flourishes that showcased her creativity and deep understanding of music. Each note seemed intentional, a reflection of her inner world translated into sound. The audience was spellbound, caught between the familiarity of the melody and the surprising nuances she introduced. It was a delicate balance, and she maintained it beautifully, letting the music unfold organically. Throughout the hall, conversations had ceased entirely. The rich and powerful who had arrived expecting formal pleasantries were now entirely absorbed. Some whispered to their neighbors in admiration, acknowledging the talent they had witnessed. Others simply sat in silence, letting the experience resonate within them. The music had become a bridge, connecting hearts and minds in a way that transcended wealth, status, and expectation. The young waitress could feel the intensity of the room, a living, breathing energy that seemed to pulse with each chord she struck. It was a reciprocal exchange. She gave her heart through the music, and the audience responded with their attention and emotion. She felt a profound sense of responsibility but also exhilaration. She had discovered the power of her own voice, the ability to influence and move people through her passion. The piece reached its climax, a series of rapid, intricate passages that demanded both technical skill and emotional depth. The audience was silent, hanging on each note, aware that they were witnessing something extraordinary. The waitress's fingers danced across the keys with precision and grace, the music swelling and contracting like the ebb and flow of a tide. Her heart raced with the intensity of the moment, yet her mind remained focused, entirely present in the performance. As the final chords resonated through the hall, a hush fell over the audience. The notes lingered in the air, fading slowly, leaving behind a profound sense of awe. Then, one by one, the guests began to clap, softly at first, then with increasing volume and enthusiasm. The applause grew, filling the room with energy and appreciation. The young waitress allowed herself a small, humble smile, acknowledging the moment without letting it overwhelm her. She had shared something deeply personal and had been met with genuine recognition and respect. The piece reached its climax, a series of rapid, intricate passages that demanded both technical skill and emotional depth. The audience was silent, hanging on each note, aware that they were witnessing something extraordinary. The waitress's fingers danced across the keys with precision and grace, the music swelling and contracting like the ebb and flow of a tide. Her heart raced with the intensity of the moment, yet her mind remained focused, entirely present in the performance. As the final chords resonated through the hall, a hush fell over the audience. The notes lingered in the air, fading slowly, leaving behind a profound sense of awe. Then, one by one, the guests began to clap, softly at first, then with increasing volume and enthusiasm. The applause grew, filling the room with energy and appreciation. The young waitress allowed herself a small, humble smile, acknowledging the moment without letting it overwhelm her. She had shared something deeply personal and had been met with genuine recognition and respect. The atmosphere in the room had transformed. What began as a formal gathering of the city's elite had become a shared experience of emotion and artistry. The music had leveled the social playing field, if only for a short while, allowing the audience to connect with something real and beautiful. The waitress felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that her passion had created this connection, that her courage to step forward had changed the evening for everyone. As the crowd continued to applaud, the organizer approached her again, her expression one of sincere admiration. "I have never seen anything like that," she said. "You have a gift, and tonight you have made this event unforgettable." The young woman nodded, feeling a warmth in her chest that was both pride and humility. She had always known her music could move her personally, but to see its effect on others, especially such a discerning audience, was a revelation. After the applause subsided, the waitress returned to her serving duties, her movements now imbued with a quiet confidence. The staff and guests alike regarded her differently, a newfound respect evident in their glances and gestures. She realized that she had crossed a threshold, stepping from the background of service into the forefront of recognition. Yet she remained grounded, aware that this was just the beginning of her journey. that the music would continue to be both a challenge and a source of joy. Throughout the rest of the evening, she found small moments to play again, brief interludes between serving duties. Each time, the audience responded with the same enthusiasm and admiration, reinforcing her growing confidence. She began to see herself not merely as a waitress with a hidden talent, but as an artist capable of touching lives and creating experiences that mattered. By the end of the night, the hall was quiet once more, the guests having departed or moved to quieter corners. The young waitress sat at the piano, fingers resting lightly on the keys, reflecting on the evening. She thought about the courage it had taken to step forward, the hours of practice that had prepared her for this moment, and the power of passion to transform not just her own life but the experience of others. She felt a deep sense of satisfaction, knowing that she had embraced her true self and shared it with the world. As she left the hall, the echoes of the evening lingered in her mind. The applause, the expressions of awe, the quiet whispers of appreciation. She knew that her life had shifted in a meaningful way, that this night would remain a pivotal moment in her journey. The young waitress had discovered that talent, courage, and authenticity could create extraordinary experiences, and she carried this lesson with her as she stepped back into the world outside the grand hall, ready to continue sharing her gift wherever the opportunity arose. The evening had settled into a gentle rhythm, but the energy of the room remained electric from the earlier performances. The young waitress moved with grace, attending to her duties, yet her mind was still with the music that had carried her through the night. She felt a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration, a combination of physical fatigue and emotional fulfillment. Each note she had played lingered in her memory, reminding her of the courage it had taken to step into the spotlight and of the impact it had on the audience. She glanced across the room and noticed the subtle shifts in the guests' behavior. Conversations were quieter, more thoughtful. There were smiles and nods exchanged, acknowledging the performances they had just witnessed. Some were whispering excitedly to each other, sharing their astonishment at the hidden talent of the young waitress. She realized that her music had done more than entertain. It had brought people together in a shared moment of genuine appreciation, a rare occurrence in a room full of wealth and formality. The organizer approached her once more, her expression softening with admiration. "You have changed the atmosphere entirely," she said. "I never imagined that one person could have such an effect. The guests are genuinely moved. Can I count on you to play one final piece before the evening concludes?" The waitress felt a flutter of nerves, but also a strong sense of determination. She nodded, understanding the importance of this moment, and returned to the piano, ready to give everything she had. She seated herself and let her fingers hover above the keys. The audience, sensing another performance was about to begin, turned their attention to her with anticipation. The first notes she played were soft, almost tentative, creating a sense of intimacy in the grand hall. She allowed the melody to grow slowly, each note carefully chosen, conveying depth and emotion. This piece was different from the others. It was personal, a story she had composed in private, now shared with an audience that had no idea of its meaning. The challenge was immense, but she felt ready. As the music flowed, she noticed subtle reactions around the room. A couple, who had been engaged in quiet conversation moments earlier, leaned toward each other, their hands lightly touching in silent appreciation. A man at the far end of the hall wiped a tear from his eye, moved by the beauty of the performance. These small gestures reminded her that music had the power to reach beyond words, to touch hearts in ways that conversation or social rituals could not. She continued to play, each chord and melody carrying a piece of her story. The audience responded intuitively, their focus unwavering, their energy subtly shifting as they connected with the emotions embedded in her music. It was as if the walls of the room, polished and imposing, faded away, leaving only the sound of the piano and the collective experience of those present. The waitress felt herself becoming part of something larger than herself, a shared moment of humanity and artistry. Her hands moved with increasing confidence, dancing across the keys, weaving intricate patterns that held the audience's attention. She experimented with dynamics, soft passages giving way to powerful crescendos, and then retreating into delicate whispers. The crowd was entranced, their reactions a mixture of awe, admiration, and quiet reflection. Some closed their eyes to fully immerse themselves in the music, while others leaned forward, captivated by the skill and emotion that flowed effortlessly from her fingers. The staff watched from the edges of the hall, witnessing the transformative effect of her music. They had known her as a diligent, reliable worker, someone who quietly fulfilled her duties without drawing attention. Yet now, they saw her in a new light, a young woman capable of commanding a room, evoking emotion, and creating a moment that would be remembered by all present. The contrast between her usual quiet presence and the power of her performance was striking, leaving them with a sense of pride and admiration. The guests themselves were undergoing subtle changes. The rich and powerful who had arrived expecting entertainment were now experiencing something far more profound. Their usual social barriers, the carefully constructed facades, were temporarily set aside as they allowed themselves to be moved by the music. The performance had created a rare equality among them, a moment where emotion and artistry transcended wealth and status. The young waitress's courage and talent had shifted the evening into something unforgettable. As the piece progressed, the waitress became increasingly absorbed in the music. Her nervousness had vanished, replaced by a deep sense of presence and purpose. Each note she struck was intentional, a reflection of her emotions and experiences. The audience's engagement fueled her performance, creating a feedback loop of energy and connection that was palpable throughout the room. She felt an extraordinary sense of fulfillment, realizing that she was capable of reaching people in ways she had never imagined. The final passages approached, intricate and demanding, yet she navigated them with skill and confidence. Her fingers flew across the keys, maintaining precision while expressing profound emotion. The room seemed to hold its breath, the audience fully immersed in the music. When the last note resonated and slowly faded, there was a moment of silence, a collective pause as everyone processed the performance. Then, almost simultaneously, applause erupted, filling the hall with enthusiastic appreciation. The young waitress allowed herself a brief, humble bow, acknowledging the response without letting it overwhelm her. She felt a sense of connection and recognition that she had never experienced before. The audience, now fully engaged, expressed genuine admiration and respect, reinforcing the impact of her talent and courage. The performance had achieved more than she had anticipated. It had touched lives, created a shared emotional experience, and transformed the atmosphere of the evening. The organizer approached again, her expression a mix of relief and awe. "You have exceeded every expectation," she said sincerely. "The guests are still talking about your performance, and I am truly grateful that you stepped forward." The young waitress nodded, feeling a warm sense of accomplishment. She realized that her journey had taken a significant turn, that her talent was now recognized and valued in ways she had never imagined. As the guests began to depart or move to quieter areas, the atmosphere in the restaurant had shifted permanently. What had begun as a formal gathering of high society had become a night marked by shared emotion, artistry, and human connection. The young waitress, moving among them to attend to her duties, felt a profound sense of satisfaction and pride. She had embraced her passion, shared it with the world, and discovered the impact she could have when she allowed herself to shine. Throughout the rest of the evening, she found small moments to reflect on the experience. She thought about the courage it had taken to perform, the countless hours of practice, and the emotional journey she had undertaken. Each guest's reaction, each gesture of admiration, reinforced her sense of purpose and potential. She understood that her life had been transformed, that her talent had created opportunities and recognition she had never imagined possible. By the time the last guests had left and the hall grew quiet, the young waitress sat at the piano once more, fingers resting lightly on the keys. She reflected on the evening, on the power of music to unite and move people, and on the courage it had taken to step forward. She felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that she had created something meaningful, that she had touched lives and transformed a formal gathering into a memorable and emotional experience. The night had been a turning point, a moment when her passion and talent were fully realized and appreciated. setting the stage for the next chapter of her journey. The restaurant had finally begun to quiet down as the last guests left, their conversations reduced to soft murmurs, footsteps echoing gently across the polished floors. The young waitress, still wearing her uniform, walked slowly among the empty tables, absorbing the calm after a night filled with excitement and unexpected triumph. She had completed her performances, and the memory of the music she had shared lingered in the air like a delicate fragrance. It was a strange feeling to be alone in the grand hall, yet not lonely. The evening had changed her in ways she was only beginning to understand. As she approached the piano, she paused and looked at it with a mixture of affection and awe. This instrument had been her companion in private moments for years, a silent confidant that had witnessed her joys, frustrations, and dreams. Now, it had also been the vehicle through which she had connected with the world, through which she had made a difference in people's lives, however briefly. She placed her fingers lightly on the keys, feeling the familiar resistance, the smoothness of each one, and allowed herself to replay the evening in her mind. The applause, the smiles, the whispers of admiration, all of it was vivid in her memory. She thought about the initial hesitation she had felt when stepping forward to offer her talent, the nervous tremor in her voice, the fear of judgment from both the organizer and the crowd. It seemed like a lifetime ago, and yet it had been only a few hours. She realized that courage was not the absence of fear, but the choice to act despite it, and she had made that choice repeatedly throughout the evening. The organizer appeared once more, her expression soft and sincere. "You have truly amazed everyone tonight," she said. "People are still talking about your performance. It was not just the music, but the emotion, the connection you created. We would be honored if you would consider performing again at future events." The young waitress felt a warmth spread through her chest, a mix of pride and humility. She had always known that her music could move her personally, but to hear that it had touched others so profoundly was deeply fulfilling. She nodded, a gentle smile forming on her lips. "I would be happy to," she replied, her voice steady and calm. There was a sense of certainty in her tone that had been absent earlier in the evening. She understood now that sharing her passion was not only a gift to others, but also a path to her own growth and fulfillment. This night had shown her the possibilities that existed beyond the walls of her apartment, the chances to connect, inspire, and be recognized for her talents. As the organizer left to finalize the closing of the event, the waitress returned to the piano bench and sat down once more. She allowed herself to play softly, improvising a gentle melody that flowed from her hands naturally. It was not for an audience this time, but for herself, a reflection of the journey she had taken that evening, a quiet celebration of what had been achieved. The notes filled the empty hall, resonating in the silence, carrying the emotions of triumph, gratitude, and hope. Her mind wandered to the guests, imagining their reactions once more, the expressions of surprise and admiration that had met her performances. She thought about the young staff who had watched her in awe, the respect that had grown in their eyes. She realized that her courage and talent had inspired more than just the audience. It had subtly changed the way those around her viewed her, perhaps even themselves. There was a ripple effect, small but meaningful, that extended beyond the music itself. The waitress reflected on her own journey, the countless hours of practice, the sacrifices made to pursue her passion quietly, and the moments of doubt that had accompanied her along the way. She recognized that each step, each decision to persevere despite uncertainty, had prepared her for this night. The evening had been a culmination of her dedication, skill, and emotional honesty. It had also been a beginning, opening doors she had never considered, revealing possibilities she had only dreamed of. As she played, the quiet of the empty restaurant became a companion, a space where she could process the night fully. She thought about the social barriers she had observed among the guests, the usual preoccupations with status and appearances, and how her music had transcended them. In that moment, she understood the true power of art. It could dissolve walls, create connections, and evoke emotion that was universally human. She felt humbled by the realization that her small act of sharing her music had achieved something so significant. After a while, She allowed the final notes to fade into silence and rose from the piano bench. She straightened her uniform, took a deep breath, and walked toward the exit of the restaurant. The staff were finishing their tasks, some exchanging quiet congratulations, others simply acknowledging her presence with a respectful nod. The young waitress realized that her life had changed, not dramatically in outward appearance yet, but in substance and direction. She now understood her own value, her ability to impact others, and the importance of embracing opportunities that aligned with her passions. Outside, the city lights twinkled, reflecting off wet pavement from a recent drizzle. The air was cool and crisp, a refreshing contrast to the warmth and excitement of the restaurant. She paused for a moment, looking up at the night sky, allowing herself to feel the magnitude of what had transpired. The evening had been more than a performance. It had been a revelation, a test of courage, and an affirmation of her potential. She felt a renewed sense of purpose, knowing that she could step forward again, that the world had room for her talent, and that she had the strength to embrace it. As she walked home, she thought about the future. Opportunities might arise for her to perform again, perhaps in ways she had never imagined. She considered the possibility of pursuing music more seriously, exploring her abilities, and sharing her gift with a wider audience. Yet, she also understood the importance of staying true to herself, of maintaining the authenticity that had made her performances so impactful. The recognition she had received tonight was meaningful, but it was the connection through music, the shared human experience, that mattered most. Back in her small apartment, she sat at her own piano, the familiar keys greeting her with comfort. She began to play once more, allowing the melodies to flow freely, a mixture of improvisation and practiced pieces. The music filled the room, echoing softly against the walls, carrying with it the memories of the night and the emotions she had experienced. She felt a deep sense of peace, knowing that she had taken a step forward, embraced her passion, and discovered a new chapter in her life. As she played, she reflected on the lessons learned. The courage to act despite fear, the importance of sharing one's gifts, and the impact of authenticity and emotion on others. She realized that this night would remain a defining moment in her journey, a source of inspiration and motivation for all the days to come. The applause, the admiration, and the recognition had been wonderful, but it was the realization of her own potential, the understanding that she could influence and inspire, that truly resonated within her. By the time she set her fingers down and closed the piano, the room was quiet and still. She felt a sense of closure and accomplishment, a gentle satisfaction that was both comforting and energizing. The young waitress knew that her life had shifted in a meaningful way, that her talent had been seen and appreciated, and that the possibilities ahead were broader than she had imagined. The evening had been a turning point, a moment of transformation, and a testament to the power of courage, dedication, and passion. With a final glance at the piano, she allowed herself a small, contented smile. She understood that this was only the beginning, that more challenges, opportunities, and triumphs lay ahead. Yet she also knew that she had proven to herself the importance of stepping forward, of embracing who she was, and of sharing her gifts with the world. The young waitress left her apartment that night with a sense of hope and purpose, carrying within her the knowledge that her life had changed forever, that she had discovered the extraordinary within herself, and that her music had the power to touch hearts and transform experiences in ways she had never imagined possible.